Trump is threatening to hike tariffs on Canadian autos, and Canada says it will hit back. Every time two governments reach for tariffs, the price tags in your driveway and your grocery store quietly move. So, here's the one question that keeps getting buried. Who actually pays a tariff? The dispute between the United States and Canada over auto tariffs has put one of the world's closest trading relationships under serious strain. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney accused the U.S. of trying to destroy Canada's auto industry. He made clear he would only return to the negotiating table if the U.S. arrived with what he called the right attitude. The U.S. responded by threatening to push tariff rates even higher on Canadian vehicles. Two neighbors, two of the largest trading partners on Earth, pointing tariff guns at each other across a border that has been largely open for decades. And here's what matters to you. Every escalation in that standoff has a way of traveling, quietly, without announcement, straight into the prices you pay. The mechanism that carries it there is older than either country, and understanding it tells you exactly how exposed you are the next time a politician reaches for this particular weapon. A tariff is, at its core, a tax. Not a penalty paid by the foreign government, not a fine levied on a foreign company. A tax collected at the border from whoever imports the goods, and then, almost always, passed forward. That is the first thing most people get wrong, and it is the most important thing to get right. When a car built in Canada crosses into the United States with a tariff attached, the American importer pays that tax to the U.S. Treasury. The Canadian factory doesn't write a check to Washington. The American buyer, the dealership, the distributor, eventually the person signing the financing paperwork, absorbs the cost. Now, the importer can try to push back on the exporter for a lower price. And sometimes that works, partially. But the tariff is not split neatly. It lands somewhere in the supply chain, and the supply chain finds a way to move it toward the end. Here's the deeper layer. Canada and the United States don't just trade finished cars. They trade parts, engine components, transmissions, wiring harnesses, that cross the border multiple times before a vehicle is complete. A tariff on auto parts doesn't hit one transaction. It hits every crossing. That compounding effect is what makes auto tariffs particularly sharp. By the time a finished vehicle rolls off the line, a single tariff rate has been applied at several points along the way. The cost doesn't add up linearly. It multiplies. And whoever ends up buying that car is standing at the bottom of that stack. Think about how a restaurant works. The chef buys ingredients from a supplier. The supplier buys from a farmer. If the cost of flour rises, the baker raises the price to the supplier raises it to the restaurant, and the restaurant raises it to you, with a margin added at every step. Nobody along the chain absorbs the full hit alone. Everybody passes it forward, and by the time it reaches your table, the original increase has grown. A tariff works exactly the same way, and the auto industry is one of the most layered supply chains on Earth. A single modern vehicle contains tens of thousands of individual parts. Those parts come from dozens of countries. In the US-Canada trade relationship, a component might be made in Ontario, shipped to Michigan for assembly into a subunit, returned to a Canadian plant for final integration, and then imported back into the US as a finished vehicle. Each border crossing with a tariff attached is another point where the cost rises. Like flour hitting the price at the farm, again at the bakery, again at the restaurant. What makes tariff escalation particularly dangerous in this kind of supply chain is the retaliation loop. One government raises a tariff. The other retaliates. Now costs are rising in both directions simultaneously. The chef's flour costs more, and so does the salt. The restaurant can't absorb both. Everything on the menu goes up. Retaliation doesn't cancel the original tariff. It layers on top of it. And the person at the table, the end consumer, is the one reading a menu with higher prices and no explanation on it. A tariff war is never just a dispute between governments. It is a pricing event that shows up in the real economy, carried there one margin at a time. Let's make this concrete. The most direct place a US-Canada auto tariff lands is on the sticker price of a vehicle. Canada is a major source of assembled cars and auto parts sold in the United States. When tariffs raise the cost of importing those vehicles, dealers face a choice: shrink their margin or raise the price. Most of the time, they raise the price, especially when tariffs apply across many competitors at once, leaving buyers with fewer low-cost alternatives. The ripple doesn't stop at the dealership. A car is also an input to other things: delivery fleets, ride services, logistics companies, all of them buy vehicles. When vehicle costs rise, those businesses face the same menu problem as the restaurant. Their operating costs go up, and those costs travel downstream into delivery fees, freight rates, and service prices. There's a second channel that often gets overlooked: parts and repairs. Many of the components used to fix existing vehicles cross the same borders that tariffs now make more expensive. A repair bill isn't just labor. It's a water pump made in one country, assembled into a subunit in another, imported into a third. Tariffs on parts don't just hit new car buyers. They hit anyone who owns a car and needs to keep it running. Now consider the broader economic backdrop. U.S. inflation, as measured year over year, was running at 3.3% as of mid-2026. That's the environment into which a fresh wave of auto tariffs would land. Not a blank slate, but a consumer already watching prices. An additional cost shock in a category as large as transportation doesn't need to be enormous to be felt. It adds pressure where pressure already exists. The mechanic's invoice, the monthly payment, the cost of getting to work. Those are the places a trade war actually lives, not in the press conferences where it starts. So who actually pays a tariff? Now you have the full answer. Not the foreign government, not the foreign exporter, at least not primarily. The tariff is paid by the importer, passed through every layer of the supply chain with a margin added at each step, and collected, finally, quietly, from the end consumer. The foreign country does feel an effect. If demand for its goods drops because prices rise, its exporters sell less. That is the intended pressure. But the cost of applying that pressure is borne on both sides of the border. The government imposing the tariff is taxing its own consumers to squeeze the other country's producers. That is not a secret. It is the basic arithmetic of how tariffs work, and it has been true for as long as tariffs have existed. What changes between episodes, what makes some tariff disputes sting more than others, is how deeply integrated the supply chain is. The more times a component crosses a border before it becomes a finished product, the more times the cost compounds. The US-Canada auto relationship is one of the most integrated in the world. That's what makes escalation here particularly expensive for ordinary buyers. It's not just a political dispute. It's a pricing mechanism being applied to one of the most complex, most cross-border supply chains in modern manufacturing. And every time a politician calls a tariff a negotiating tool, the person at the end of the supply chain, at the dealership, at the repair shop, at the checkout, is the collateral. The flour gets more expensive. The menu price goes up. You're the one at the table. If this changed how you think about the next tariff headline, subscribe, because the mechanism behind the news is always the part worth understanding. Share this with someone who thinks trade wars are someone else's problem.